and said, I know the skirt is long, but I looked at all the suits in this whole mall, and this is the only one that makes me look good. Why don't you get a pantsuit? You got a pantsuit. I don't want to look like you. Excuse me? You won't be looking like me because we won't be getting the same pantsuit, stupid. So what, dummy? I don't want to wear a pantsuit, okay? So don't wear a pantsuit then. But you don't need to wear that long skirt. Don't tell me what I should be wearing. I'm only trying to help you. Why are you always trying to help somebody when you don't never want nobody helping you? This was the type of conversation that followed the girls everywhere they went, and why no one wanted to be around them but them. They really didn't care because they felt everyone else was beneath them and preferred each other's company, so whatever. When they had purchased the last of their outfit and had their hair, nails, and feet done to perfection, they went to Danny's house to plan for the next day. They had decided earlier that Cherie would spend the night, and they were glad they did because they were so wound up. They would have spent hours on the phone if they had been separate from each other. So at least their cell phone bill wouldn't go through the roof. They had set their clothes out, and after plotting and planning their entrance, they propped themselves up on pillows so their hairdos wouldn't get ruined and went to sleep. At 7 a.m. on Sunday morning, Denise and William were awakened by the annoying buzz of their alarm clocks telling them it was time to start a new day. Denise went around the house, waking the children and preparing breakfast while supervising bathroom time and checking everyone's attire. By 9:30, they had all eaten, washed up, dressed, and was ready to head out of the door so they wouldn't be late for Sunday school. Before they left the house, they all stood in a circle, held hands, while Denise prayed and finished by each of them quoting a scripture. Then they exited the house and settled into the minivan on their way to the house of the Lord. Will was dressed before 8:30 and decided to have a cup of coffee before starting out. He laughed at himself for the nervous energy he felt in the pit of his stomach. You would think he was 16 years old going out on his first date or something. Looking at his watch, he decided it was time so he could allow for traffic. He never liked to arrive late anywhere, and he wasn't about to let today be the first day that he was. Cherie and Danny woke up at 7 a.m., but by 9:30 they still weren't dressed and didn't care one little bit. They had no intention on arriving on time because the whole purpose of them buying these outfits because the whole purpose they had no intention on arriving on time because the whole purpose of them buying these outfits was for them to arrive after everyone was sitting so they could make an entrance and be noticed. They walked out of Danny's house at exactly 10:25 and immediately knew they had chosen the right outfits because by the time they reached the corner, they had been offered rides by no less than 8 guys driving by. When Denise and the kids walked into the church, they drew quite a bit of attention because their church was not an overly large church. Denise was well known, and almost everyone knew of the plight of the Cooper children and that they were going to be coming to live with the Jones family and would be attending this church. The children hurriedly found a seat and kept their eyes on the front of the church so they wouldn't have to look into the eyes of the curious. After about 20 minutes, everyone had turned their attention back to the front of the church, and the children sat back, ready to enjoy the morning service, when the door opened and all eyes were again turned to see who was entering the sanctuary. Lynette Jones was so furious that everyone in the church would forever link her and her family with the poor little half-white kids that she was having a hard time getting into the service. She finally forced herself to listen and sing along with the praise and worship leaders when the door opened and she found herself, along with the other congregants, turning to see who was entering the church. When she saw that it was Coach Banyan, it was all she could do not to faint on the spot. What was he doing here? Looking at her brother and sister, she knew they were asking themselves the same question. She realized she was staring at him with her mouth open and quickly shut it, but found she could not tear her eyes away from this handsome face. He had shaved since yesterday, and he was dressed in an impeccable gray suit. And oh dear God, he looked fine. But what the heck was he doing here? Surely he didn't come to worship at their church. Didn't he have his own church? What in the name of all sanity was he doing here? Just then the coach looked her straight in the eyes and smiled. It was like a cold splash of water in her face because it snapped her out of her daze. And after smiling back, she turned around and faced forward again. She knew that for her, there would be no getting into the service now because there was no way she was going to be able to concentrate with this fine white man sitting behind her. Oh dear God, what was he doing here? Denise was so happy to be the vessel God was able to use to rescue these children from the hell they were trapped in, and for the wonderful thoughtfulness of her children, she couldn't stop raising her hands and her voice in praise to him. She was so glad to be in the house of the Lord that the stares of the congregants went completely unnoticed by her. She had been called to help with worship and praise and was facing the door when it opened, and for a minute she thought she was seeing things when a white man entered. Everyone had turned their heads to see who was coming into the church, and they all seemed taken aback to see this white man, all dressed up in a sharp suit, come in and take a seat. There was something very familiar about this man, and looking at the reaction of her children helped her to put two and two together. This was the coach that had helped her children move the furniture yesterday. And then she realized she did remember him from the school, but looking at him all dressed up, she also realized that she didn't remember how fine he was. Maybe it was because when she saw him, he was in sweats and had a basketball in his hands. Whatever the reason, he sure looked different now. Forcing her mind back to the present, Denise closed her eyes so she could get her mind back on the Lord and away from that fine white man. But for the rest of the service, there was a question that kept nagging at the back of her mind. What was he doing here? When Coach Banyan walked into the church, Matt was shocked and puzzled at the same time. He didn't know what would make his coach come to an all-black church, but since he already coached in a mostly all-black school, nothing he did surprised Matt. He didn't care about all the looks coming from everybody in the church because, in his opinion, people are strange creatures, and you should always expect the unexpected from them all the time. He was enjoying the service and didn't give the arrival of the coach a second thought. But when the door opened for a second time, he was not prepared for what he saw.